For this episode of Children of Heroes, we headed about 2 hours northwest from London to Stanton-upon-Bardon, where we talked to Mr. Štěpán Drexler, son of Sergeant Štefan Drexler and stepson of Lance Corporal Franta Bělský.
Thank you for participating in our project Children of Heroes. Your father was possibly part of the Special Operations Executive during the Second World War. Could you tell us more about him?
I don't really know enough about him. My natural father, he never talked about it particularly. I know he was part of the SOE. He trained with the SOE. The one thing he said, which was very bizarre, and I have no idea whether this is true or not, but he said that he received a parcel from his old landlady from Czechoslovakia that she'd sent when he escaped. She bundled it and sent it just to him in England. And it was all Czech clothes. So they used the Czech clothes, his Czech clothes, for the people that were being parachuted into Czechoslovakia because they were original. So it was like a cover story. That was the only thing he ever said, really. Other than that, he kept very quiet about it. I think he was quite broken by the war. He was quite difficult to be with.
Your parents immigrated together with you and your siblings in 1966?
Yes, because of my father's war record, it was quite difficult. He went back after the war and stayed because he believed in this new world. So he did join the Communist Party for a period, but it was a very strange relationship because of his war record, the fact that he'd actually served in the SOE and on the British side rather than on the Russian side. It got very complicated for him. He was marginalised. And at one point, I think my parents were told somehow through friends that he was on a list. I think they were like potential traitors. So my parents decided that they would leave. My mother was able to get a cultural exchange through her work as a sculptor to go and study art in Italy, and was able to get a visa for my father as well. But the children, unfortunately, they wouldn't allow the whole family. So my parents went, and then the three of us, myself and my sisters, were smuggled out of the country in the back of a Skoda.
With the help of a British family?
Yeah, with the help. Well, somehow we were passed from family to family. Mm-hmm. And yes, a British family took us from Yugoslavia into Italy. Then we were smuggled into France through the Mont Blanc tunnel, and then we stayed with a French family for a period, and my father came to the UK to get visas for the family to come over legally. Because of his war record, he thought that would be all right. And yeah, we actually came to England legally. For me, it was a very odd way to go on holiday. That's what it felt like.
Your mother, Irena Sedlecká, was a very famous Czech sculptor. How was it for her to establish herself in the United Kingdom?
Difficult. I think one of the reasons that she wanted to escape Czechoslovakia was she felt that slightly betrayed by the Communist Party, by what was happening in the country, and didn't want to be a propagandist for the regime anymore. But having been an established sculptor in Czechoslovakia, then to come to the UK as a total unknown was very difficult for her. It took a long time to establish herself, which she finally did, with the help of Franta. I mean, because they knew each other when Franta was at the Art Academy in Prague, so they knew each other, and then re-established the friendship when Mum came, and Franta helped a lot, introduced her to the British Sculptors Association, and slowly but surely she got some private commissions and then some public commissions as well.
She later married him.
Yes, yeah.
Another famous Czech sculptor living in the UK, Franta Bělský.
Yes, so Franta was, for me, I suppose, the most important male figure in my life. I knew him from the age of 11 and later knew him really as my stepfather.
He served as a soldier during the war?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, so
do you know something more about the service?
he escaped with his parents in 1939. His father was an eminent economist, but there was a warrant for his arrest. So they managed to get out just in time, came to London. And Franta immediately volunteered for the Czechoslovak army and was sent to France. He was then in the French army in the Czech brigade as a gunner on horse-drawn artillery. They were in northern France, set up in a French farm. He went to the loo, which was a little cabinet outside, and he heard a shell coming in. He could hear it whistling in, and he thought, okay, well, this is it. It hit just in front of the toilet. Luckily, it didn't explode. Just the impact of it sent the whole thing up into the sky. And he said he wasn't hurt apart from his pride because he was just covered. That experience of nearly dying, he said from that moment on, his attitude to life changed. And he said that he would never look back, he would only look forward, and he would enjoy life to the maximum. When France fell, his brigade were in the south of France, and they refused to surrender because there would have been a death sentence. The Germans would have seen them as traitors. And the French wanted them to surrender, but they said that if need be, they were going to fight the French as well as the Germans. And the French had agreed that Churchill could send ships to pick them up. He was put on a ship called the Northmore, and it was a coal-carrying ship which still had its cargo. So there was accommodation for 11 crew, and they'd put 1,700 soldiers on this ship. So they were basically in the hold with the coal, and took them, I think, about 8 days to get to Gibraltar. And Franta always said that they arrived looking more like chimney sweeps than soldiers because they were just covered in coal dust. And then from Gibraltar they were taken to England, and then he was in the army here, trained, and then went back to Normandy in 1944 and served under Montgomery and Patton, and again as an artilleryman. But he was a spotter, so he was quite forward looking to see how accurate the bombing was. Quite dangerous, I think. He was awarded for bravery. Yeah, so France's medals. So mentioned in dispatches, so he has the oak leaf on the British medals, and the Medal for Valour, Czech medal, and the medals for the overseas army. So yeah, they were very important to him. There's a nice picture of him wearing his medals, meeting the Queen when it was the unveiling of the Mountbatten statue. So after the war, Franta went back to Prague, back to his studies at the Prague Academy of Art. And that's where he met my mother. So they knew each other from that point. During that time when he was studying, he made the monument to the paratroopers, the Operation Arthropod, which is on the church wall. And again, obviously, when the communists came to power in 1948, he came back to the UK, picked up his studies again in the UK here at the Royal Academy of Art. So he was already a known student. He'd also studied in the UK during the war. When he was in the army training, his officer said to him at one point, I think you're going to make a better artist than you are a soldier. And he gave him leave to continue his studies at the Royal Academy. So he was training as a soldier and training as an artist at the same time. The monument at Cholmondeley, the memorial stone, that was one of his pieces that he did in 1940. So he was sort of already establishing himself in the UK during the war. And after the war, he got some very important public commissions, which really made his name. He's also done a memorial plaque for Westminster Abbey for the Czechoslovak forces.
Franta Bělský was the only one who had a chance to make bust of 4 generations of the royals.
Yeah, he was quite a frequent visitor to Buckingham Palace, obviously. There was one occasion when he was invited to lunch with the Queen, which was quite funny. You'd get like a little card of who was going to be there, and I think there were 6 people who were going to have lunch with the Queen and Prince Philip. And the corgis were always around. But the Queen had a very bad habit of feeding the dogs at the table, like giving them little... So the dogs were always annoying people. And Franta never suffered fools gladly, so he kicked one of the corgis that was under the table. He claimed it was accidental, but I know Franta, it wasn't accidental. The dog was annoying him, so he kicked it. But I think he must be one of the few people that got away with kicking the Queen's corgi.
His work is in Prague, London, in the United States.
Yeah, so he's got a very famous Churchill statue in the United States. He said that he'd planned to do Churchill from the time that he was on parade with Churchill in 1940. And Churchill stood in front of him and looked him square in the eye. He said from that point in, he wanted to do a Churchill statue. And he got the opportunity. The famous speech that Churchill made in 1946 about the Iron Curtain. You know, there is an Iron Curtain descending upon Europe. And the Americans wanted to celebrate that, the statue at Fulton, Westminster College, where he'd made the speech. So Franta got his chance. I think it was 1971, and the statue went up with Gorbachev in front of it. So he thought that was always very funny. And then he had done a few busts of Churchill. I think there's one outside the English embassy in Prague.
What was your profession?
I was head of buying for various companies in the fashion industry up until 10 years ago.
You speak very well Czech?
Yes, I mean, that was very important to me that I kept the Czech. And in fact, my children are very disappointed because they didn't learn Czech, because I was often working overseas, that they spend most of their formative years with their mother. So they grew up with a Scottish accent rather than speaking Czech.
You are one of the highest ranked jiu-jitsu masters in the United Kingdom. What brought you to this passion?
It's quite a long story. I needed a release, really, and at school we had a judo master, so I started doing judo and contesting in judo as a teenager. And in 1979 I broke my leg in a competition, and whilst I was recovering, a friend of mine said, you could try jiu-jitsu because it's not as intense as judo, and I'd lost my judo license. So I tried jiu-jitsu, and what he didn't tell me was that the guy that he took me to had been 5 times British champion. And he said, oh, well, you've done a bit of judo. So he managed to throw me all over the floor and then showed me a bit of jiu-jitsu. And I'd never felt pain like it. And I thought, yeah, this is definitely for me. I sort of started training 45 years ago and have never stopped. And it's been a passion. I've trained in Japan under traditional jiu-jitsu. I've taught in Japan our modern version of jiu-jitsu, and it's just been a lifelong passion.
You have a black belt?
I have there's 10 degrees of black belt, and I have a 9th degree, so I'm 9th Dan. Indicted into the Hall of Fame of the World Elite Black Belt Society, so it's a very proud moment.
You've done fencing?
Yes, a long time ago I fenced, yes. I fenced for the school and county, but that was again a school. School had a fencing master, so yeah, that was basically anything that involved combat I was interested in.
How did you combine your job and sports?
Yes, the family didn't see a lot of me because I was either overseas working or training. Training was very important to me. That was one of the things that sustained me through everything. Well, one of the reasons why I decided 10 years ago to stop working was so that I could spend more time with my family and also spend some time with my children, because I'd worked overseas quite a lot and also trained overseas. It just meant that I had more time for them.
Is there anything else you would like to add?
Just really how very proud I am of Franta and my mother, and the trials and tribulations that they went through, and always looking for the positive and the future to build, I think, what they saw as a better world.